They called themselves Apex. They spoke like kings and hunted like butchers. They wore armor carved from the bones of conquered species and hung teeth as trophies from their belts. The galaxy bent around their war routes the way a forest bows to fire. When we first met them, they laughed at us. Not out of humor, out of certainty. In their eyes, humanity was just another noise to quiet, another cage to fill. I remember the smell before the sound, ozone and burned oil, a tang over the chewing grit of a cheap rebreather. We were crouched in a slag trench outside Ananke Station, a mining rock turned slaughterhouse. Night on that moon was a dim violet smear, the sky full of dust and cold sparks. Our helmets gave us a false dawn in ghostly outlines. The station, the pens, the patrol path where the predators walked and dragged boots through ash. My pulse beat against the chin seal. I pressed a gloved finger to the side of my helmet and whispered, "Kestrel actual, eyes on target, 3 escorts, 1 overseer, confirm?" "Confirmed," came the reply in my ear. Calm, clipped. People think calm voices are brave. Mostly it's habit. Bite the fear in half and talk through the blood. The overseer was tall even for their kind. Plates of dull black chitin wrapped his torso. A mantle of scales shifted when he turned his head. He carried a shock lash on one hip and a clawed glaive on the other. The escorts chatted in their own tongue, a wet, clicking sound that reminded me of someone cracking lobsters at a fancy table. I'd seen what those claws did to human rib cages. You don't forget shapes like that. Between us and them, the pens hummed with low power and misery. Slaves. Not just ours. The predators didn't bother sorting species when profit was the only measure. I saw a small figure reach for the fence, flinch, and fold back into a knot of bodies, the way a wounded animal learns the shape of electrified pain. That was enough. "On my mark," I breathed. We didn't have laser lances or plasma whips. We had rifles that spat hypervelocity needles and grenades built by people who read the manuals twice. We had body armor that worked if you didn't ask it to be magic. We had reason and rage. I popped up over the lip of the trench and squeezed the trigger. The overseer's head rocked back with a neat pair of holes through the eye cluster. He fell without a sound, heavy as a dropped anvil. The escorts froze a heartbeat too long, the kind of stillness you only see in predators that don't expect to be prey. My squad did not hesitate. 2 rifles hosed the left guard. A third stitched a line across the right guard's chest until black fluid steamed in the cold. I lobbed a grenade underhand at the foot of the fence post. It went off with a flat crack, the hum dying as a big rectangle of the pen's field went dark. Screams rose, high and human, mixed with other notes I didn't want names for. People surged for the gap, then stalled. You don't run free when your world has trained you to kneel. I stood up on the trench's edge and waved both arms, like a madman against a planet of shadows. "Move!" I shouted through the external speakers. "Through the breach! Heads down! Keep left! Go, go!" They ran. We covered. A patrol turret spun and found me. I felt the air buzz near my ear and dropped, kissing cinders. "Turret, south strut," I called. Thorn. Quiet. Reliable Thorn. Tagged it with a sticky charge and put the ugly thing to sleep. That was our first minute of contact. In the second minute, the station woke up. Sirens cut the night. Floodlights snapped on, washing everything in antiseptic glare. More escorts poured out of a side hatch, howling odds and victory songs even as their leader lay dead at my boots. They didn't believe he was dead. They didn't believe we could do it. Belief is a brittle thing in combat. "Reed, we have to move," Thorne said, voice tight. "More company than bullets." "Copy. Kestrel actual package retrieval," I said. The package wasn't a person. It was the overseer's wrist unit, their beacon, a thin slab of toughened glass and bone filaments, keyed by scent and pulse. If we could crack it, we could map their patrol routes, their slave shipments, their feeding lanes. We could start reminding the galaxy the taste of hope. I knelt by the overseer and tried not to think about how his eyelids still twitched. His wrist smelled like old salt and burned resin. My knife bit under the bone filaments and lifted the unit free. The bone cut clean. I wasn't gentle. "They're flanking," Thorne warned. "Smoke," I said, and popped 2 canisters. Thick gray rolled out, swallowing the floodlight glare. Muzzle flashes stuttered and died in the cloud. We moved inside the soup like urban ghosts. Shoulders brushing, boots placing themselves where training tells them. I slid the beacon into a chest pouch and clapped the flap down. A shape lunged out of the smoke with a club the size of my thigh. I took it on my forearm. The impact rang up my arm and bit my teeth together. Pain flared hard. The club came again and I ducked inside it, jammed my rifle against the thing's hip seam, and dumped a burst. It screamed like metal. I moved on, not waiting to see it fall. You don't pause to admire work in a meat grinder. We made the breach as the last of the prisoners spilled through. A boy grabbed my sleeve, eyes too bright and too wide. Are you human?" he asked, as if the word itself was the rescue. I nodded and shoved him toward the path. A woman stumbled, went down, got up because she had a little one hanging off her hip like a barnacle. I covered Thorne as he set charges on the station's fuel lines. The predators roared inside the smoke, angry more at the insult than the loss. Their language carried a tone I knew from every bully I'd ever met. "This isn't how the world is supposed to be. The small ones are supposed to run. The meat is supposed to wait." We fell back down the slag trench to the evac point. Our shuttle hugged the ground, engines hot and hungry. As we sprinted, gunfire chased us in bright spears that cut splinters from rock. Thorne stumbled. I grabbed his harness and yanked him along. He kept his feet, swore once, and grinned despite himself. We jumped the ramp as the last charge rippled through the station. There's a certain silence after explosives, the shocked, sucked-out moment when the world holds its breath. Then the sound came back like angry surf. The station belched fire and smoke, tearing open along the seams Thorne had loved with careful hands. The floodlights flickered and died. The predators thrashed in the glow, black on black. We climbed, fast. Below, the freed swarmed into the dark as our second shuttle dropped flares to guide them. In my chest, the beacon felt like a hot coin. The pilot's voice cut through the engine roar. "Good hunting, Kestrel. Any souvenirs?" "Just a key to their house," I said. I pulled the beacon out and looked at its dead face. It would take a clever mind to wake it. We didn't have many of those left. We had enough. People like to make speeches about lines in sand or stars, about last stands and bright dawns. I didn't feel like a speech. I felt like a man who had pulled a tooth from a monster and wanted to go back for the jaw. They had made a mistake. They had given me reasons. They had shown me what they thought my species was worth. They had called themselves Apex. They were wrong. I thought of the boy asking if I was human. Like it was a prayer. I thought of the overseer's eyes as my rounds punched through. I thought of the space between those two things, and how much killing fit inside it. We weren't strong because we were better. We were strong because we were cornered. That's when humans stop thinking about fairness and start thinking about fire. That's when we get dangerous. "Set course for the relay," I told the pilot. "Get me someone who can talk to bones and code. We're going to open the door." "Copy that," the pilot said. The shuttle nosed toward the black. Behind us, the station burned down to its foundation, a wound in the night. The predators thought nothing could defeat them. They were about to meet the one animal that fights past fear, past pain, past reason. They were about to meet us. The beacon weighed heavier with every mile we put between us and Ananka Station. Not in grams, not in mass, The weight was in what it meant. If we could crack it, if we could pull the teeth from its code, we'd have a thread to pull on the whole predator web. But if we failed, it would just be another relic of a slaughterhouse, another trophy for the dead. The shuttle bucked through turbulence as we climbed out of the moon's shadow. I braced one hand on the bulkhead, the other clamped tight around the pouch on my chest. Thorne sat opposite me, his helmet off. A strip of cloth pressed against his jaw where the club had kissed him earlier. He was pale under the grime, but his grin hadn't left. That grin was why I kept him alive. Grim humor in the middle of a graveyard. "You look like hell," I muttered. "You should see the other guy," he rasped, spitting blood into a rag. His voice carried that jagged edge, but his eyes were clear. He wasn't broken, not yet. The other survivors, our squad, what was left of it, sat in silence. 4 men, 2 women, all of them running low on ammo, energy, and hope. Behind us, in the secondary shuttle, the freed prisoners huddled together like scattered cards shuffled into one deck. A mixed mess of species and shapes. Some we barely had names for. But their eyes, every single pair of them, looked toward us. Not because they believed in us, because they needed us. That's the curse of being human. You stumble into a fight, and suddenly the rest of the beaten galaxy thinks you'll carry the banner. They don't know we're running on spite and duct tape. They don't know our tanks are empty. They just see the way we refuse to kneel, and they think we must be gods. I wish we were. "Command's going to want that beacon cracked yesterday," Thorne said after a long stretch of silence. "Think they've got someone left who can do it?" "They'll find someone," I said. "If not, we'll make one." "Make one," he repeated, smirking. "Like we're baking bread." The pilot cut in over comms. "Approaching relay, strap in." The relay wasn't much. An old human outpost dug into the bones of an asteroid. We'd been using it as a shadow hub for raids, but even calling it a base was generous. Rust, patched hull plates, flickering lights. It smelled like stale filters and burned coffee. Still, it was ours. And unlike the Predators, we built things to last even when they weren't pretty. We docked with a shudder and a hiss. As soon as the ramp lowered, the command crew was there. Colonel Vera, hard as iron, eyes that could peel skin from bone. She didn't waste time on greetings. Her gaze locked onto me. Then dropped to the pouch on my chest. "That it?" "Yeah," I said, pulling the beacon free and holding it out. "Cost us blood, but it's real." She took it like it was a live grenade, hands careful. Her thumb brushed the filaments, and her lips tightened. "Get this to R&D now." 2 techs rushed forward, taking the beacon like acolytes clutching a relic. They vanished down the corridor without another word. Vera's eyes snapped back to me. "Report," I told her. Not in long words or pretty pictures. Just the facts. The ambush, the kill, the freed prisoners, the fire in the station's veins. I ended with the same line I'd used in my head on the shuttle. They thought nothing could stop them. We proved otherwise. Her lips twitched, not a smile. Vera didn't smile, but there was satisfaction, hidden under years of bitterness. "Good work," she said. Then she leaned closer, voice dropping. "Don't mistake that for victory. You cut 1 claw. The beast still has a dozen more." "I know," I said, and I did. But I also knew beasts bleed. She dismissed us to rest, but rest wasn't in the cards. The survivors of the pens had been herded into the bay, sitting in rows, blinking under the artificial lights like owls dragged into daylight. Some were skeletal, others scarred. A few looked half dead already. I felt their stares as I walked past. One man, human by the shape of his jaw and the color of his skin, grabbed my wrist. His fingers trembled, but his grip was iron. You came, he whispered. His eyes were sunken, bloodshot, but alive in a way the predators hadn't managed to kill. I thought no one would come. I didn't have an answer. Words like, "We came for you," or "You're safe now," tasted false. Because we hadn't come for him, not really. We'd come for the beacon, and he wasn't safe. None of us were. Instead, I just said, "We fight. That's what we do." He nodded, and his grip loosened. But the words stayed with me, echoing against the parts of my skull I tried to keep quiet. 3 hours later, the techs called us to the lab. The beacon lay in pieces on a steel table, its filaments spread like veins. Screens lit up with tangled lines of alien code, pulsing with unfamiliar geometry. 2 scientists hovered over it like surgeons, sweat streaking their temples. One of them looked up when we entered. "This thing," he began, voice hoarse. "It's not just a tracker. It's a key. It holds access to their fleet network. Locations, patterns, supply chains. We're sitting on the spine of their operation." "Can you crack it?" Vera asked. The man swallowed. "We're trying, but their encryption isn't like ours. It's biological, woven into bone and tissue. It reads pulses, scent markers, neural echoes. It's alive. In a way." "Then find a way to kill it," I said. My voice came out sharper than I meant. The tech flinched, but he nodded. He knew what was at stake. Thorne leaned on the table, staring at the filaments. "So what you're saying is, we need to trick it into thinking one of us is a predator?" "Exactly," the tech said. Silence hung in the lab. We all knew what that meant. Someone was going to have to bleed, or worse, to make the beacon obey. Vera broke it. "Do whatever it takes. I want coordinates by dawn." The techs nodded, already diving back into the mess of code and bone. We left them to it. Sleep didn't come. I sat in the barracks, stripping and reassembling my rifle in the dark. The motion's automatic. My mind chewed on the same thought. They'll never believe we can win until we start tearing chunks out of their empire. One station isn't enough. We need 12, 100. And every move we make puts a bigger target on our backs. Thorne sat across from me, sharpening a blade with slow, careful strokes. "You ever think about what happens if we actually win?" he asked suddenly. I looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the galaxy looks at us now and sees hope, or defiance, or whatever keeps them breathing. But what if we win? What if we beat the predators? What happens when they turn and see we're not gods, we're just men?" "You think they'll still cheer for us then?" His words hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. Right now we were symbols, but symbols break when you touch them too hard. And humanity was good at breaking itself. "We'll deal with that when we get there," I said finally. "First we survive." He nodded, but his eyes were far away. Dawn on the relay came with alarms. Not predator ships, not yet. The techs had cracked a layer of the beacon. The lab was a frenzy, screens glowing with maps and dots. The galaxy spread out like a hunting ground. Red marks burned across it. Predator outposts, fleets, breeding pits. Too many to count, too many to fight. But there was a pattern. A web of supply lines feeding into a core hub deeper in their territory. That hub was the spine. Break it, and the rest would starve. Vera stood at the head of the table, staring at the display. Her jaw was tight. "This is bigger than we thought." "It's always bigger," I muttered. She shot me a look, but didn't argue. "We need a strike team. Small, fast. Get in, cripple the hub, get out. If we can do that, we can show the galaxy these bastards can bleed." Her eyes slid to me. I knew before she spoke. "Reed, you led the last op. You'll lead this one too." I didn't hesitate. "Understood." Thorne snorted. "Figures." "Got a problem with that?" I asked. Yeah, he said, grinning. You'll get all the glory. We both laughed, though it felt more like a release valve than humor, because we both knew what this meant. We were about to dive headfirst into the heart of the Predator Empire, and not all of us were coming back. But that's what humanity does best. We walk into hell with our fists clenched and our teeth bared. We burn ourselves to light the way. As I stared at the map, one thought burned hotter than the rest. They thought nothing could defeat them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Preparation always feels slower than war itself. In battle, you don't think. You act. You kill or you die. But before that, the quiet hours where you're cleaning weapons, checking armor seals, watching the clock tick closer to launch, that's when the weight hits hardest. That's when the ghosts crowd in. I was in the armory, running a cloth over the chamber of my rifle. Same rifle I'd carried through Ananka, through half a dozen slaughters before that. The barrel was nicked, the stock chipped, the paint half burned off, but it still fired straight. That's all I needed. Thorn came in, lugging a pack almost as big as he was. He dropped it with a thud, wiped sweat from his forehead, and gave me that lopsided grin. Tell me again why we're doing this with 6 people instead of 60? Because 60 people can't slip through unnoticed, I said. 6 might, he snorted. 6 won't come back. Maybe not. He leaned against the rack, staring at me. You don't even flinch when you say that. I stopped flinching a long time ago. The truth was, I did flinch. Inside. Every name on the roster I'd signed into the dirt was carved somewhere behind my eyes. But if you show that crack, it spreads. The squad needed me stone-faced, so that's what I gave them. The rest of the team filed in, one by one. Hartman, tall and quiet, carrying enough explosives to make a god nervous. Rivas, short and mean, the best shot in the unit. Nye and Arlen, tech rats turned soldiers, both too young to have this much blood on their hands, but hardened by the necessity of it. 6 of us total, just enough to make a dent, or to disappear without leaving a ripple. Colonel Vera briefed us in the hangar. The hub's coordinates glowed red on the display, a black sphere orbiting a dying star. Predator Central Command for this sector. Heavily armed, heavily manned, and built with the arrogance of creatures that believed themselves untouchable. You're not there to conquer, Vera said. You're there to cripple. Take out the power conduits feeding their comm relays. If we blind their fleet even for a day, it's enough. The rest of the galaxy needs proof these bastards can bleed. You'll give them that proof. I asked the question everyone else was thinking. And if we can't get out? Her stare was hard as alloy. Then you take as many of them down as you can. They need to learn that humanity never dies quietly. No one spoke after that. There was nothing to say. The ship we flew was old, stolen, and ugly, just the way I liked it. Predator hull, human guts. We'd ripped the insides out, replaced their systems with ours, but left the exterior scarred and marked with their symbols. If you squinted, we'd look like one of their own patrol craft, just enough to buy us a few minutes. Inside, it smelled like oil and blood. Hartman lit a cigarette, ignoring the no-smoking sign blinking above the console. Figure if we blow, I don't want my last breath to taste like recycled piss. Nye coughed, but didn't argue. The kid was too focused on the terminal in front of him, running through code that would spoof our transponder. He muttered to himself as his fingers tapped. If I can mask our signal for long enough, we can slide into their hangar before they even blink. And if you can't? Thorn asked. Then we die fast, Nye said flatly. There wasn't any fear in his tone, just acceptance. We launched, engines humming low. The relay shrank behind us until it was just another speck in the black. Ahead, Predator space waited. Every kilometer we crossed, I felt eyes on us, even if they weren't really there yet. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the clatter of gear checks and the occasional joke from Thorn. He kept us human with those, even if they were bad. Especially because they were bad. When the hub finally came into view, the silence turned to stone. It was massive, bigger than any station I'd ever seen. A sphere of black metal, ribbed with glowing conduits that pulsed like veins. Spikes jutted from its surface, each one tipped with gun batteries the size of city blocks. Docking arms extended like claws, holding predator ships in place as if they were prey instead of vessels. Around it, a swarm of smaller craft circled, patterns tight and disciplined. "Jesus," Rivas muttered. "Not his neighborhood," I said. "Ours now." Nye worked the console, sweat running down his temples. "Spoofing signal. Broadcasting as Predator Patrol Unit CRA 12. If their scanners aren't paying attention, we'll slide through." The ship rattled as comms pinged us. A burst of harsh, clicking language filled the cabin. Nye translated fast, his voice shaky. "They're asking why we're back so soon." "Tell them the truth," I said. "We got hit. We need repairs." He blinked at me. "You think they'll buy that?" "Doesn't matter if they buy it. Just say it." Nye fed the reply back. His voice warped through the translator. Silence followed. Long enough for my stomach to twist. Then a burst of static came through. Permission to dock. Thorn let out a low whistle. "Guess predators are just as lazy as us." "Don't get cocky," I warned. We slid into one of the docking arms. The clamps closed around us with a groan that felt too final. Inside the station, the bay opened up like a wound. Predator crew stalked the platforms, their armor glinting under cold lights. Their eyes followed us as we lowered the ramp. "Remember," I whispered into the comm, "walk like you belong. Shoot when you have to. Don't miss." We descended in 2 lines, rifles slung, faces set. The predators moved closer, curious. One barked something in their tongue, pointing to our ship. Nye replied with a clipped string of clicks, mimicking their dialect as best he could. It wasn't perfect. The predator's eyes narrowed. Then an alarm shrieked. Rivas didn't hesitate. Her rifle snapped up, and the predator's head snapped back in a spray of black ichor. The hangar exploded into chaos. We dove for cover as the rest opened fire. Their weapons spat arcs of plasma that melted steel where we'd stood seconds earlier. I rolled behind a crate, sighted, and dropped another. Thorn's shotgun boomed, shredding one of them at close range. Hartman lobbed a grenade, and the blast tore a hole in the deck. Screams echoed off the walls. "Too many!" Nye shouted. "Then we thin them!" I barked back. We fought like wolves, fast and brutal. Every shot was aimed, every movement meant to kill. But there were more of them pouring in from the corridors, claws glinting, jaws snapping. We had minutes at most before we were buried. "Hartman," I yelled, "blow the fuel lines." He grinned like a madman, slapped a charge against a pipe, and hit the trigger. The explosion ripped through the hangar, fire chewing through predator bodies and scattering the rest. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. "Move," I ordered. We pushed through the haze, deeper into the station. Rifles hot, corridors twisted like arteries, lit by pulsing red veins in the walls. The whole place felt alive, like we were walking through the guts of some beast. Every turn brought more predators, but we kept moving, cutting them down, leaving trails of black blood steaming on the floor. Finally, we reached the core chamber, a cavernous space filled with conduits thicker than houses, glowing with raw energy, the hub's heart. "This is it," I said, breathing hard. "Nye, Arlen, get to work. The rest of us hold." The techs sprinted to the consoles, plugging in their rigs. Sparks flew as they forced human code into predator systems. The conduits pulsed faster, reacting like nerves under a knife. The predators came in waves, first a handful, then dozens. We fought them back from the doors, rifles overheating, magazines running dry. Thorn went down once, a claw raking across his chest plate. I hauled him up, shoved a stim into his arm, and he kept shooting. Hartman laughed through the blood in his teeth as he set more charges, turning every approach into a kill zone. "Almost there!" Nye shouted, fingers flying. "You better be," I growled, emptying another clip. My arms burned, my throat raw from shouting. Every second felt like borrowed time. Then the conduits screamed, a sound like metal tearing itself apart, reverberating through the chamber. The lights flickered, then died. The hum of power stuttered and collapsed. "We did it!" Arlen yelled. "We blinded them!" I didn't have time to celebrate. The doors blew inward, and a predator twice the size of the rest stepped through. Armor thicker, claws longer, eyes burning with rage. Their commander. It roared, the sound shaking the walls. And for the first time, I saw hesitation in my squad's eyes. This wasn't just another soldier. This was a monster. I leveled my rifle, swallowed the fear, and said the only words that mattered. "Then let's show it what humans do." The Predator commander moved like a landslide wearing armor. Every step shook the deck, his claws carving sparks as they dragged across the metal. He didn't bark orders or call reinforcements. He didn't need to. He was the kind of brute whose presence alone rewrote the rules of a fight. Thorn whispered, "Holy hell," under his breath. "Don't freeze," I snapped. "Aim center mass. Bring it down." We opened fire in unison, rifles cracking, muzzle flashes strobing the chamber. Bullets sparked against the commander's armor, some embedding, most ricocheting. The creature barely flinched. Then it lunged. It crossed the room faster than something that size had any right to. Rivas was the first in its path. She squeezed off a last shot before the thing's clawed hand backhanded her across the chamber. She hit the wall with a sickening crunch, slumping to the ground. "Rivas!" Nye shouted. He started toward her, but I yanked him back just as the commander's glaive carved a glowing arc where his head would have been. The blade chewed through a console, sparks showering the room. Hartman stepped forward with a growl, slapping a charge onto the commander's leg and kicking off. The blast blew chunks of armor free, exposing slick, black muscle beneath. The creature roared, a sound that rattled my ribs, and backhanded Hartman the way it had Rivas. He didn't get back up. Rage clawed at my throat. 2 down in seconds. I forced the emotion into action. I dove low, sliding across the slick floor, and jammed my rifle up under the exposed muscle on its leg. I squeezed the trigger, unloading the magazine until smoke poured from the chamber. The creature staggered, ichor splattering hot against my arms. It howled, lifted its leg, and kicked. The world spun, my chest armor denting under the blow, pain detonating in my ribs. I slammed into a bulkhead and tasted blood. "Keep pressure on him," I coughed. Thorn roared like a man possessed, emptying both barrels of his shotgun into the commander's chest. At this range, even Predator armor couldn't shrug it off. Plates cracked, flesh tore. But the monster still came, driving its glaive through Thorn's shoulder and pinning him to the wall. Thorn spat blood, laughed through it, and shoved a grenade into the joint of the glaive. "Chew on this," he hissed. The blast blew half the weapon apart and tore chunks out of the commander's arm. It staggered back, screeching, black fluid pouring from the wound. Thorn slumped, barely clinging to life, but still grinning. Nye and Arlen had been firing non-stop, their rifles glowing hot. Now Nye dropped his weapon, grabbed a length of conduit from the ruined console, and jammed it into the Predator's exposed chest cavity. Electricity surged, the smell of burning meat filling the chamber. The commander convulsed, screeched, and tore the conduit free. His armor smoked, but he was still standing. Arlen screamed in frustration, drew his sidearm, and charged. The commander's claw came down in a blur, and Arlen was gone, cut in two before he could even fire. His scream ended in silence. "Fall back," I shouted, But there was nowhere to fall back to. The commander swung its ruined glaive, the blade slicing through air with a sound like thunder. I ducked under it, ripping my combat knife free. I wasn't thinking tactics anymore. Just survival. Just rage. I climbed its wounded leg, drove the knife into the gap in its chest armor, and used it like a ladder rung. The commander thrashed, claws raking across its own body as it tried to dislodge me. My knife found a seam near its neck. I jammed it in and twisted with every ounce of hate I had left. "Die, you bastard!" I roared. The commander bellowed, staggered, and slammed its back against the bulkhead, trying to crush me. Pain flared in my spine, but I held on, digging deeper, twisting harder. Black ichor sprayed across my visor, burning where it touched skin. My arms felt like they'd tear out of their sockets, but I didn't stop. Thorn, bleeding and half dead, raised his shotgun one last time. He aimed at the wound I'd opened and pulled the trigger. The blast blew through the gap, tearing a chunk out of the commander's neck. The monster collapsed to its knees, roaring one last time before pitching forward like a felled tree. The deck shook with the impact. For a long moment, the only sound was our ragged breathing. Then Nye whispered, Is it dead?" I slid off its back, landing hard on the deck, knees buckling. I pulled my knife free from the ruin of its neck. "Yeah," I rasped. "It's dead." But the cost was written in blood all around us. Hartman gone, Arlen gone, Rivas broken, Thorn dying on his feet. I knelt beside Thorn, grabbing his harness to steady him. "Stay with me." He coughed, blood spilling down his chin. "Worth it," he muttered. Tell them we made the bastards bleed." "You can tell them yourself," I growled. But even as I said it, I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't have much left. Nye stumbled to the console, hands shaking. "We blinded them. The comm relays are fried. Whole sector's gone dark." "That'll buy time," I said, my voice hollow. "But the second they know, they'll send everything they've got to hunt us." As if summoned, alarms began to wail. The station groaned, emergency lights bathing the chamber in red. Reinforcements were coming, a lot of them. "We can't hold this place," Nye said, panic rising in his voice. "We don't need to hold it," I snapped. "We just need to live long enough to get out." Thorn barked a laugh that turned into a wet cough. "Then let's make it one hell of a walk." We dragged Rivas with us, her breath shallow but steady. Thorn leaned on me, every step leaving a trail of blood. Nye clutched his rifle like it was the only thing keeping him tethered. We moved through corridors littered with predator bodies, past flames chewing through conduits, alarms howling in the background. The predators swarmed, but they weren't organized. Blinded, cut off from their fleet, they stumbled like a beast with its eyes gouged. We used that. Every fight was brutal, fast, bloody. I lost count of how many fell before us. My rifle was dry, my knife chipped, my fists raw. It didn't matter. We kept moving. At last, the docking bay came into sight. Our stolen ship sat waiting, smoke curling from its hull where stray fire had kissed it. Predators crowded the bay, dozens of them, maybe more. Too many for the four of us. "Options?" Nye asked, his voice breaking. "Only one," I said. Hartman's last pack of charges weighed heavy in my pouch. I pulled them free, set the timer, and looked at Thorn. He understood immediately. "Blow the bay," he rasped. "Exactly." We planted the charges around the fuel lines, the walls, the supports. Every step felt heavier, the predators moving closer, their eyes burning with fury. Finally, we made it to the ramp. Thorn collapsed just shy of it. I hauled him up, but his body sagged like dead weight. "Go," he whispered. "I'm done." "The hell you are," I snarled, dragging him up the ramp. He grinned weakly. "You're too stubborn to bury, Reed." "Damn right," I said, slamming the hatch shut behind us. Nye fired up the engines as I keyed the detonator. The charges went off in a rolling wave, the entire bay collapsing inward, fire chewing through predator bodies. The station shuddered, alarms shrieking higher. We blasted free, the docking clamps tearing loose. Behind us, the hub's surface split in half, flames billowing into the void. The predator fleet outside scrambled, confused, blind without their comms. We cut a path through the chaos, diving into the black. Inside the cabin, Rivas groaned, alive but broken. Thorne slumped in the seat beside me, blood soaking his armor. Nye piloted with white knuckles, sweat pouring down his face. I looked back at the burning hub, its veins of light sputtering out one by one. For the first time, predator arrogance looked small, fragile, breakable. They thought nothing could defeat them, I whispered, but they've never fought humans who've got nothing left to lose. And I swore, right there, as the hub burned. This was only the beginning. The hub burned for days. You could see it from half a system away. A ball of black metal split wide like a rotten fruit, fire spilling out into the void. Predator wreckage floated around it in silent arcs, drifting like corpses in a tide pool. Our ship limped back toward the relay, hull scorched, engines whining like old bones. The four of us who remained alive sat in silence. Every breath was ragged, every movement heavy. Thorne was the worst. He bled through every bandage I wrapped him in, his skin pale, lips cracked. But he wouldn't let go. He sat propped against the bulkhead, shotgun across his lap, whispering jokes through bloody teeth. "We killed their god," he kept saying. "We killed their damn god." Rivas stirred now and then, groaning, ribs broken. Arm useless. She didn't talk. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Rage. Grief. The kind of fire that doesn't burn out, only down. Nye was a shell. The kid hadn't stopped shaking since the hub. He'd watched Arlen get cut in half, watched Hartman torn apart, and the weight of it pressed down on him like gravity turned cruel. He fiddled with his rifle over and over, not cleaning it, just touching it, like it was the only thing keeping him tethered. Me? I just kept my eyes on the beacon's console. The hub's death had blinded half the predator fleet in this sector. I saw their ships scattered, signals erratic. For the first time, their coordination fractured. And that meant something bigger than any victory speech. It meant we'd drawn blood that mattered. The relay cheered when we docked, not because we were heroes, because we'd made it back at all. Colonel Vera was waiting, arms crossed, eyes sharp as razors. She looked us over, our broken bodies, our missing brothers, and for a moment, the steel cracked. Just a flicker, a twitch of grief in her jaw. Then it was gone. "Report," she said. "The hub is gone," I told her. My voice was rough, scraped raw from shouting and breathing smoke. "Their comnet is down. They're blind, scattered, for now." Vera nodded once, sharply. "And your team?" I looked at the floor. "Half." Silence hung heavy. Then she said, "They'll be remembered. Not honored, not immortalized. Remembered. That was all soldiers got anymore. The survivors we'd freed from Ananke Station, those who'd followed us back to the relay, looked at us like we were legends, eyes wide, jaws tight. I saw it in every glance. Hope. And I hated it. Hope is dangerous. It builds expectations. It makes people think you can do the impossible twice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The relay bunk was hard, the air stale, but it wasn't that. It was the weight. The dead sat with me in the dark. Hartman's grin, Arlen's scream, Rivas's broken body, Thorne's blood. Their faces played behind my eyelids every time I closed them. I found myself walking the relay's corridors. The station was alive with noise. Freed prisoners being clothed, fed, patched up. Soldiers running drills, techs picking apart the scraps we'd salvaged. The relay felt more alive than it had in years, but I knew why. Because, for once, they believed the predators could bleed. At the mess hall, I found Thorn. He was hunched over a tray he hadn't touched, face pale but eyes still carrying that reckless spark. He looked up as I sat across from him. "You're supposed to be resting," I said. He smirked. "Rest when I'm dead." "By the look of you, that's sooner than later." "Maybe. But hell, Reed, we did it. We cracked them open. You saw the fire." "They'll remember it." I leaned back, studying him. "You think this was enough? One hub?" "It's not about enough," he said. "It's about showing teeth. Wolves don't need to win every fight. They just need the pack to believe the prey bleeds." I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. 2 days later, the retaliation came. Predator ships descended on one of our outer colonies, a farming rock called Kestrel 9. No warning, no demands, just fire. They burned fields, slaughtered families, strung bodies from the colony's comm tower. A message, written in blood and smoke: "You are not safe." When the news reached the relay, the air grew thick. Rage, fear. The cheers that had greeted us when we returned curdled into something darker. Vera slammed her fist against the briefing table. "They want us to crawl. They want us to kneel. They think fear will smother us." Her eyes cut to me. "What do you think, Reed?" I thought of Kestrel 9, of the smell of burning crops and the screams of children, of predators laughing as they carved through unarmed farmers. "I think fear doesn't smother humans," I said. "It sharpens us. They've just made their second mistake." The days that followed blurred. We rebuilt, armed up, and trained harder. The relay wasn't just a hiding place anymore. It was a war camp. The freed prisoners joined the drills. Some could barely hold rifles. Others fought with a desperation I recognized. They'd lost everything already. They had nothing left to fear. Nye threw himself into work, patching ships, hacking systems, building weapons out of scraps. It was his way of fighting the ghosts. Rivas, once she could stand again, pushed herself through the pain, ignoring the medic's warnings. She fought like every punch was payback. Thorn should have been dead 3 times over, but he kept walking, kept grinning. His body was failing, but his spirit burned hotter than ever. And me? I kept leading. Because if I stopped, if I let the cracks show, everything would fall apart. One night, I found Nye hunched over a console in the hangar, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking as he coded. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Mapping," he muttered. "The beacon gave us more than the hub. It gave us threads, supply routes, convoys. I'm building patterns." "For what?" He looked up at me, and for the first time in days his eyes had fire. "To bleed them dry, hit their veins, starve them, one strike at a time." I stared at him, and something shifted. The kid who'd trembled in the hub was gone. What sat in front of me was something harder, sharper. War had carved him into steel. By the week's end, we had our next target, a predator supply convoy. Nothing glamorous, just fuel, weapons, food. But without supplies, even predators starve. The plan was simple. Ambush, hit hard, vanish. No heroics, no speeches, just teeth in the dark. As we prepped, I caught myself looking at the faces of my squad, what was left of it. Nye, sharpening his code like a blade. Rivas, strapping her broken arm into a brace and loading magazines with her good hand. Thorn, coughing blood but still laughing, promising to make the next predator scream louder than the last. We were broken, scarred, half dead already. But we were still human, and that meant we weren't finished. The convoy came into view against the black. A line of predator haulers, flanked by escorts, glowing faintly with their bioluminescent markings. Easy prey, if prey could bite back. Our ship slipped into position, hiding in the debris of an old asteroid field. We watched through scopes, breaths shallow, fingers tight on triggers. "On my mark," I whispered. The predators thought they were untouchable. They thought we were cornered, weak, dying. They were wrong. We hit them like lightning. Hartman's old charges, rigged to the rocks, blew half the escort ships apart in the first blast. The others spun in panic, blind in the confusion. Rivas's shots punched through cockpits. Nye's code locked their comms. Thorn's shotgun thundered in the boarding bay as we cut into the first hauler. Inside, predators roared, claws flashing, but we weren't prisoners anymore. We weren't prey. We were the fire they never saw coming. Blood sprayed, metal screamed, and in the chaos I saw it. The truth that had been there all along. They weren't gods. They weren't unkillable. They were just predators. And predators bleed. The hauler's corridors reeked of ozone and blood. Predator ichor steamed where it hit the deck, stinking like burned metal. My boots slipped on it as I pushed forward, rifle barking in short bursts. Thorn was behind me, half dead already but grinning through blood as his shotgun thundered. "Clear!" I shouted, shoving a predator's corpse off my barrel. "Clear!" Thorn croaked, though he was coughing harder than he was breathing. Rivas limped in behind us, her arms strapped tight against her chest, her good hand keeping her rifle steady. She didn't complain, didn't slow. Just put another round into a twitching predator on the deck and kept moving. We forced our way into the hauler's control chamber. 2 predators spun from their stations, jaws wide, claws raised. I cut the first down. Rivas dropped the second. Nye barreled past us, dropping his kit on the console. His hands moved like lightning, plugging in cables, patching human hardware into predator flesh tech. Sparks flared, code streaming across his visor. "Talk to me, Nye," I growled, watching the door. "I've got their cargo manifests, rerouting their nav data. Give me a second." "You've got half a second," Rivas snapped. Thorn chuckled, leaning on the wall. "She's cranky when she's bleeding." "Shut up and stay alive," I barked, but even as I said it, I heard how weak his breathing was. Nye's hands danced faster. "Almost there, and done. I've locked the other hauler's thrusters. They're sitting ducks, and I'm copying everything. Supply routes, fleet movements, garrison posts, this is gold." "Good," I said. "Now wipe the rest. Don't let them track us." He nodded, sweat dripping into his eyes as he purged the system. Then the deck lurched under our feet. Hard. Hard enough that I slammed into the wall and tasted blood as my teeth cut my lip. "What the hell was that?" Rivas hissed. Nye's eyes went wide. "They knew! Reed, they knew we'd hit this convoy." The comms crackled with static. Then a predator voice boomed through the hauler's systems. Harsh clicks, guttural snarls. Even without a translation, I understood the tone. Mocking. Triumphant. It wasn't a convoy, it was bait. The viewport flared with light as predator warships ripped into the system, blinking out of slip space in perfect formation. Bigger than anything we'd fought before. Their hulls bristled with weapons, glowing veins pulsing brighter than the haulers. "Trap!" Thorn rasped, grinning through blood. "They set a goddamn trap." "Shut it down!" I barked at Nye. "Lock the hauler, crash the systems, anything." "I can't," Nye said, his fingers blurring. "They're overriding. Jesus, they're inside everything." The lights cut out. Emergency strobes flared, painting the chamber in pulses of red. Then the doors blew open, and the predators stormed in. Not the rank-and-file brutes we'd fought before. These were armored heavier, their claws sharper, their movements faster. Hunters, built for killing specialists. "Hold the line!" I roared. The chamber erupted in chaos. Rivas fired till her rifle clicked empty, then drew her sidearm and kept firing. Nye ducked behind the console. plugging cables back in with one hand and firing blind with the other. Thorn laughed like a lunatic, blasting predators apart until his shotgun clicked dry, then swinging it like a club. I waded into them with rifle and knife, every movement born of desperation. A predator lunged, claws raking my armor. I drove the knife up under its jaw, twisting until black ichor sprayed my visor. I shoved it down and kept moving. Another came for Thorn. He barely blocked the strike, his shotgun splintering under the blow. The predator's claws punched through his chest plate. He screamed but didn't fall. He shoved himself forward deeper onto the claws and jammed a grenade into the predator's mouth. "Smile for me," he spat. The blast painted the chamber in gore. When the smoke cleared, Thorn was gone. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Thorn, my brother in blood, the man who'd laughed at death more times than I could count, was nothing but red mist and shredded armor. Rage roared up in me, white hot, swallowing grief whole. I ripped the rifle from my back, switched to full auto, and poured rounds into the pack. Every shot punched through armor, shredded limbs, tore skulls apart. Rivas joined me, screaming like an animal, her pistol barking until it clicked empty. She drew her knife and charged, slashing and stabbing, her broken arm dangling uselessly at her side. Nye shouted over the chaos, "I've got their systems back, briefly. Shields are dropping, if we run now." "Do it!" I barked. We cut down the last of the hunters, bodies piling around the console, ichor slick on every surface. Nye slammed a final key, and the hauler's systems shrieked. Power surged, conduits sparking. The ship shuddered violently, alarms howling. "She's going to blow!" Nye gasped. "Then we're leaving." I hauled Rivas to her feet, her face pale but eyes burning. Nye ripped his kit free, and we sprinted for the docking bay. The corridors were alive with predators, but now chaos was on our side. Alarms wailed, doors slammed shut, conduits burst into flame. The hauler was eating itself alive under Nye's code. Predators scrambled, confused, snarling at each other in panic. We cut through the confusion, killing what we had to, dodging the rest. Our ship waited in the bay, hull still hidden under scavenged predator markings. We barreled up the ramp, Rivas covering our backs, Nye slamming the hatch shut. "Go, go, go!" I barked. The engines roared to life. We blasted out of the bay just as the hauler split apart, explosions tearing through its spine. The predator warships outside scrambled, shifting formation to block us. "They're on us!" Nye shouted. "Then lose them!" I snapped. The ship bucked as plasma fire ripped past us, burning holes in the void. I gripped the seat, every muscle tight, as Nye jerked the stick, weaving through the wreckage. Predator ships closed in, their engines glowing, claws reaching. Then Rivas dragged herself into the co-pilot's chair, blood soaking her side. "Open the external feeds." "What?" Nye asked, panicked. "Just do it," she barked. He slapped the control. Rivas grabbed the comm, her voice raw but steady. She broadcast on every open predator frequency, her words biting, venomous. "You call yourselves hunters," she snarled, "but you're bleeding. We burned your hub. We gutted your convoy. You think humanity is prey? We are the nightmare that hunts you. You hear me? We are coming." Her voice echoed back through the speakers, bouncing across their networks. Every predator ship in range heard it, every commander, every soldier. And they hesitated. Just for a breath, that was all Nye needed. He slammed the ship into slipspace, tearing us free of their formation, vanishing into the black. When the stars stretched back into place, silence filled the cabin. Rivas slumped back in her chair, unconscious, blood dripping from her lips. Nye's hands shook on the controls, and I just sat there, staring at the empty seat where Thorn should have been. His laugh still echoed in my skull, louder than the alarms. We'd won nothing. Not really. The predators had set a trap, and we'd barely crawled out of it alive. Thorn was dead. Half our squad was gone. But we had their data, their supply routes, their fleet movements, and Rivas's words, broadcast across their channels, would eat at them. Predators don't fear. That's what they tell themselves. That's what they believe. But fear was in them now, and humanity would feed it. The relay dock was quiet when we came in. Too quiet. No cheering crowds this time, no frantic hands reaching to help us off the ramp. Just silence, broken by the echo of our boots as Nye guided the ship into its berth. When the hatch opened, the smell of oil and recycled air rushed in. Colonel Vera stood waiting with a handful of officers. Her face was stone, but I saw it, the flicker of her eyes as she counted us. 3. That's all who walked off the ship. Rivas, half carried between me and Nye, her uniform stiff with dried blood. Nye himself, eyes hollow, shaking as though he hadn't stopped since the trap was sprung. And me, dragging my rifle like it weighed a ton, armor scorched, visor cracked. Thorn wasn't with us. Hartman wasn't with us. Arlen wasn't with us. Vera's jaw tightened, but she didn't ask. She didn't have to. She knew. "You have the data?" she said. I pulled the drive from my pouch and slapped it into her hand. "Convoy routes, fleet positions. They set a trap for us, but we gutted them anyway. They bled. Colonel, they'll bleed more." Her hand closed around the drive like it was a weapon. She gave a curt nod, then glanced at Rivas. "Get her to medbay." 2 soldiers stepped forward to take her weight, but Rivas shoved them off with her good arm, staggering down the corridor on her own. Stubborn to the last. Vera turned back to me. "You should rest." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Rest? You think the predators are resting?" She held my stare. "You're not the only soldier in this war, Reed." "Then act like it," I snapped. "We can't keep waiting for them to come to us. We have their maps. We have their convoys. Let me hit them again." The officers shifted uncomfortably. But Vera didn't blink. "We'll hit them," she said, "but not like you think." Later, in the command center, the drive's contents filled the screens. Red lines traced across the galaxy, connecting predator supply routes like veins. Clusters of outposts blinked like diseased nodes. Entire sectors glowed with predator fleets. "This is bigger than we imagined," one of the analysts whispered. "They're everywhere. It's not an empire, it's a plague." Nye stood beside me, his fingers twitching as he studied the data. "But they're stretched thin. Look here. And here. Their supply lines cross systems without strongholds. If we cut those, whole fleets will starve." Vera nodded slowly. "He's right. This isn't about fighting them head-on. We bleed them dry, one vein at a time." Another officer cleared his throat nervously. "Colonel, with respect, if we escalate, they'll retaliate harder. Kestrel 9 was just the beginning. If they focus their wrath on Earth—" "They already have," I growled. "You think they'll spare us because we play nice? They slaughter without reason. They burn colonies because they can. The only thing they understand is fear." The officer went pale, looking to Vera. But she didn't answer him. She was staring at me, studying me. "You want to turn this into a war of terror," she said. I didn't deny it. Yes, we can't outgun them. But we can make them look over their shoulders. We can make them bleed for every step they take. You saw what Rivas did. Broadcast our voice into their networks. They heard us. They know us now. That's our weapon. The room was silent. The officers shifted. Some looked sick. Some looked hungry. Vera finally said, "Then we'll give them something to fear." Word spread fast, not just through the relay but beyond. The freed prisoners carried stories to other outposts, other colonies. Stories of humans striking back, of predator hubs burning, of convoys gutted. And then the whispers started from species who'd never lifted their heads before. The Drethi, skeletal beings who'd lived in predator pens for centuries, sent a message through a smuggler. If humanity fights, we fight. The Tovek, insectile miners from broken moons, delivered ore to our relay without asking payment. For weapons, their envoy rasped. Even some human colonies that had long stayed silent sent transmissions. We'll resist. Just tell us where to strike. The galaxy was stirring, and the predators felt it. That's when the warnings began. We intercepted a message from the Kairen Collective, one of the few powers not crushed under predator claws. Their emissary's voice was cold, formal. Humanity. You do not understand what you provoke. The predators are older than your species. Stronger. They have culled entire civilizations. Do not mistake your small victories for strength. Stop before you doom us all. I slammed my fist on the console. Cowards. They hide behind silence and beg us to kneel. Let them. We'll stand alone if we have to. Nye looked at me, his eyes shadowed. What if they're right? They're not, I snapped. We've proved it. Predators bleed. And once the galaxy sees that, they'll have no choice but to rise with us. But in the dark corners of my mind, I wondered, what if the Cairn were right? What if we were only feeding a fire that would consume us all? In the med bay, I found Rivas sitting upright, her arm in a brace, her ribs wrapped tight. She looked like hell, but her eyes burned hotter than ever. You should be resting, I said. She smirked. You sound like Vera. Don't insult me. Her smile faded. Thorn's gone. I didn't answer. I keep hearing him laugh, she whispered. Like he's still here, like he's waiting for the next fight. He'd want us to keep moving, I said. Not wallowing. She nodded slowly, then fixed me with that unblinking stare. Then let's move. Let's make them remember every name we've lost. We struck again. And again. Convoys burned, outposts fell silent, predator patrols vanished into the void, their wreckage drifting like broken bones. Each raid was smaller than the last, but each cut deeper. And each time the predators grew angrier. Their broadcasts filled the void with threats, promises of extinction. Their ships spread wider, their hunts more desperate, but desperation cuts both ways. One night, as I stared at the map in the command center, I realized something. Their movements weren't just retaliation. They were spreading themselves thin, pulling forces from one sector to reinforce another, covering cracks we'd carved. And cracks grow. It was Nye who brought the real breakthrough. He stormed into the command center, eyes wild, a data slate clutched in his hands. I found it, he said. Found what? I asked. Their nest, he whispered. Not a hub. Not a convoy. The heart of this sector, a breeding world, thousands of them, maybe millions. The room went silent. They think it's hidden, Nye continued. But the routes, the supply chains, it all points back to one system. If we hit it, Reed, if we burn it, they'll never recover. Vera's eyes narrowed. You're talking about genocide. No, I said, stepping forward. I'm talking about survival. The officers shifted, some murmuring in agreement, others in horror. But all of them knew the truth. The predators had given humanity no choice. Gather what forces we can, Vera said finally. If we're going to strike their heart, it'll take everything we have. Nye's hands shook, but his voice was steady. We'll need more than us. We'll need allies. I looked at him, then at the map of the galaxy, glowing red with predator claws. Allies will come when they see we're not afraid, I said. We'll show them. We'll burn the predators where they breed. That night, alone in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling and thought of Thorn, of Hartman, of Arlen, of every face I'd left behind. I thought of Earth, far away, quiet, unaware of the storm coming. I thought of the freed prisoners who whispered our names like prayers, and I thought of the predators, laughing in their arrogance, believing nothing could ever defeat them. They were wrong. The galaxy was shifting, and humanity, broken, bloodied, half-dead humanity, was the knife turning in the wound. The galaxy doesn't change in silence. It shifts in fire, in screams, in blood spilled where no one thought it could be. Word of the breeding world spread like a spark in dry grass. We didn't broadcast it, but whispers move faster than orders. The Drethi offered ships, rusted freighters, retrofitted with guns they barely knew how to use. The Tovek came with ore cannons that looked like mining drills, but fired slugs the size of trucks. Even the cowards of the Kairen sent a transmission, half warning, half surrender. If you strike, we will not stand in your way. That was enough. We gathered everything we had at the relay. A ragged fleet of human vessels, corvettes, shuttles, mining barges turned into gunboats. Around them, alien ships floated like scars, mismatched, ugly, but bristling with new purpose. I stood in the hangar, staring at the chaos. Men and women loading rifles, alien claws sharpening blades, techs rigging explosives that would never pass inspection. It wasn't an army, it was a mob with teeth. But mobs change empires. Rivas limped up beside me, her arm still bound in a brace, her jaw clenched tight. "They'll never expect this," she said. "They'll expect us to die," I muttered. She smirked. "Then let's disappoint them." Nye appeared, a datapad clutched in his hands. His face was pale. Eyes bloodshot, but his voice was steady. "I've mapped their defenses. The breeding world is ringed with orbital cannons and shield stations. A straight assault is suicide." "Then we don't go straight," I said. He looked at me, waiting. "Predators think like predators," I continued. "They expect prey to come running at their throat. We'll hit the legs instead. Cut the shields, starve the cannons, and drop hell on their nest." Rivas nodded slowly. "You want to burn a world?" "Yes," I said, "because if we don't, they'll burn 100 of ours." The fleet moved in silence. No transmissions, no chatter, just the steady hum of engines, the pulse of blood in our ears. When the predator world filled the viewport, my stomach turned. It was massive, a black sphere choked with storms, its surface crawling with hives and spires that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. Orbital cannons ringed it like teeth, each one glowing with power, ready to carve us into dust. Around them, predator ships circled, sleek, armored, patient. They thought no one would ever dare. They were wrong. "Shields first," I barked into the comm. "Nye, get me their codes." "I'm on it," he said, fingers flying. His console lit up with predator glyphs, streaming like fire. "I can't shut them down completely, but I can scramble them. Make them think we're ghosts." "That's all I need." The fleet surged forward. Drethi freighters spat crude missiles. Tovek ore cannons thundered. Human corvettes loosed salvos of rail slugs. The first predator cannon fired, a beam of light that split space, vaporizing a Drethi ship in one strike. But the rest kept coming, their fire slamming into the shield grid. The shields shimmered, flickered. Then Nye's code bit. The grid stuttered, one section collapsing. "Holes open!" he shouted. "Push through!" I roared. Our ship dove into the gap, followed by a swarm of allies. Predator ships surged to block us, but Rivas's fire chewed through their hulls. Drethi freighters rammed straight into escorts, detonating in suicidal bursts that tore holes wide enough for us to slip past. The surface of the world loomed. Hive spires rose like daggers, each one bristling with predators. The atmosphere boiled with storms, lightning streaking across the clouds. The ground below glowed faintly red, like the planet itself was alive and angry. "Target the spires," I said. "If we cut their breeding pits, we cut their future." We dropped hard, thrusters, screaming. Our ship slammed into the surface near one of the largest spires, skidding across black rock before digging in. The ramp dropped, and the stench hit us. Rot, blood, the musk of predators in numbers too big to imagine. We poured out with rifles ready. Drethi fighters followed, their skeletal frames bristling with scavenged weapons. Tovek miners stomped into the mud, their claws dragging crude cannons. Predators swarmed, thousands of them crawling from the spire like ants from a nest. "Hold the line," I roared. The battlefield dissolved into madness. Rifles cracked, cannons thundered, predators shrieked as they rushed us in waves. Black ichor sprayed, mixing with human blood in the mud. Lightning tore the sky open, thunder drowning out the screams. Rivas fought like a demon, firing with one arm, stabbing with the other when her pistol clicked empty. Nye crouched behind wreckage, patching drones into predator systems, turning their own turrets against them. Drethi and Tovek fell in heaps, but they kept fighting. Their fear burned away in desperation. I waded through the swarm, rifle and knife slick with ichor, every strike fueled by rage. A predator lunged. I gutted it. Another clawed at my chest. I broke its jaw with my rifle stock. My world shrank to blood, sweat, and the steady rhythm of killing. Then the spire itself screamed. The ground shook as the hive opened, disgorging something bigger. A predator titan armored in plates of living bone, claws the size of blades, eyes burning red. It roared, the sound shaking the air, and the swarm parted around it. The commander of the nest. "Focus fire!" I bellowed. Every gun turned on it. Slugs slammed into its armor. Explosions tore chunks of flesh away, but the titan kept coming. It swept its claws, tearing Drethi in half, crushing Tovek underfoot. Its roar drowned the thunder. I charged. The titan's claw came down, smashing the ground where I'd stood. I rolled, came up under its reach, and drove a grenade into the seam of its armor. The blast blew a crater in its side, black ichor flooding out. It staggered but didn't fall. Rivas limped forward, rifle blazing, shouting through blood. "For Thorn!" Her rounds punched into the wound I'd opened. Nye scrambled up wreckage, hauling a stolen predator cannon onto his shoulder. He fired, the blast tearing through the titan's arm, sending it crashing to the ground. But the titan struck back, sweeping its other arm. Rivas went flying, slamming into a rock. She didn't get up. "Rivas!" I screamed, but the roar of the titan swallowed her name. Nye's cannon recharged, but the titan's claw ripped him from his perch. He screamed once, then went silent. I was alone. The titan loomed over me, bleeding, burning, but still alive, still towering. I raised my rifle, empty, my knife, chipped. My body screamed in pain, and I laughed. "You thought nothing could defeat you," I spat, voice raw. "But I'm human, and humans don't stop." I ripped the last charge from my belt. Hartman's design, heavy, unstable, meant to level bunkers. I armed it, the timer screaming red, and sprinted straight at the titan. It roared, claws sweeping down. I dodged once, twice, then leapt, driving the charge into its chest cavity. I jammed my knife in to hold it there, then dropped, rolling away as the timer ticked. "Die with me," I whispered. The explosion tore the sky apart. The titan's chest blew open, ichor and flame spraying in every direction. Its roar turned into a scream, then into silence as it collapsed, the spire crumbling with it. The ground shook, the storm split, the hive fell into ruin. When the dust cleared, the titan was a smoking crater, and I was still standing. Hours later, the fleet's guns finished what we'd started. Spires burned across the planet, hives collapsing into ash. Predator screams echoed into silence as fire spread. The breeding world died, its future choked in smoke and ruin. The cost was staggering. Half our fleet gone. Drethi and Tovek slaughtered in heaps. Rivas dead. Nigh dead. My squad finished, buried in the mud of a world that should never have been touched. But we had done it. For the first time in the galaxy's memory, the Predators had lost a world. Their nest was ash, their arrogance broken, and humanity. Broken, bleeding. Half-dead humanity had proved the truth. Predators are not gods. Predators bleed, and once they bleed, they can die. When the fleet limped back to the relay, the galaxy was watching. Signals poured in from every corner, whispers of uprising, offers of alliance, pleas for leadership. Vera stood at the command table, listening, her face unreadable. She turned to me, battered, scarred, a lone survivor of a squad that no longer existed. "They're looking to us now," she said quietly. I met her gaze. My hands were still stained black with Predator blood. My chest still ached with every breath. My squad's voices still echoed in my ears. "They should be afraid," I said. "Of us?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "of humanity." The Predators had thought nothing could defeat them, but we had entered the fight, and the galaxy would never be the same again.